The helicopters faded into the distance, leaving behind a heavy silence that settled over the rocky valley. The team moved fast, as they always did, keeping low and close, boots pressing into dry soil that had not seen rain in months. Night still clung to the land, but the sky was already starting to thin, trading deep black for a dull gray. Time was tight. Everyone knew it, even if no one said it out loud. This mission was supposed to be simple. Go in quiet. Observe. Confirm what intelligence believed to be a small enemy presence. Then leave before sunrise. No long firefights. No chaos. Just clean work. That was the plan given hours earlier under dim red lights and short sentences. The terrain, however, had other ideas. The valley narrowed more than expected, forcing the team into a tight path between rock walls. Loose stones shifted underfoot. Every sound felt louder than it should have been. The men slowed their pace, scanning shadows and listening for anything that felt wrong. Nothing moved. No voices, no engines. Just wind sliding across stone. They pressed forward anyway, by the time the first shot cracked through the air. The sky had lightened enough to reveal shapes and ridges. The sound echoed sharply, bouncing off the rocks before anyone could react. The team dropped instantly, spreading out and finding cover where they could. More shots followed, controlled and steady, coming from above. They had been seen. The enemy had the high ground. That fact alone changed everything. Rounds struck stone and dirt around them, sending small bursts of dust into the air. The team returned fire, not wildly but carefully, aiming toward flashes and movement they could barely make out. The valley offered little protection. Every position felt exposed. Every second stretched longer than the last. Radio traffic picked up, short and urgent. Reports came in fast. No one was hit, but they were locked in place. Moving forward was too risky. Pulling back meant crossing open ground. Either choice could cost lives. The team leader weighed options quickly. Air support was mentioned, then dismissed just as fast. The enemy was too close. One wrong move from the sky could turn a bad situation into a disaster. As the firefight dragged on, the pressure grew heavier. Ammunition had to be watched closely. Water was limited. The sun was climbing, stealing away the last of the shadows that helped hide them. The longer they stayed, the more visible they became. Somewhere behind the main line, away from the shouting and movement, another figure lay still. She had not fired a single round. Not yet. She had arrived with the team as part of the broader operation. Quiet and focused, carrying gear most people barely noticed. She was trained to observe before acting, to let moments unfold before making decisions that could not be taken back. While others scanned wide areas, she watched details. She noticed how the enemy shots followed a pattern. Not random, not panicked. She counted the seconds between bursts. She tracked where the flashes appeared and how they shifted. The enemy was confident, organized. They believed they had full control of the valley from her position. She could see parts of the battlefield others could not. Small angles between rocks, gaps in the ridgeline, places where movement briefly broke cover. She did not rush. The team on the ground felt the weight of being pinned down. Muscles tightened. Breathing grew shallow. Every movement had to be earned. Still, they stayed disciplined. No one broke formation. No one panicked. Training held them together. The leader checked the time again. Extraction was becoming less likely by the minute. If help did not come soon, they would have to fight their way out. And that path would be costly. Another burst of fire raked across their position, forcing them lower. Dirt pressed into faces and hands. One operator clenched his jaw, steadying himself, waiting for the sound to stop before lifting his head again. Behind them, the quiet figure adjusted her position by inches, slow enough not to draw attention. She tested the ground beneath her, making sure it would not shift. She raised her optics, steady and patient. She was not thinking about heroics. She was thinking about distance, wind, angles. What mattered now was not speed, but certainty. The enemy believed they were safe, elevated, hidden, untouchable. That belief was the most dangerous thing they had. The team continued to hold, unaware that the balance of the fight was already beginning to shift. What felt like a stalemate was, in truth, the calm before something very different. No one could see it yet. No one could feel it. But the moment was coming as the sun crept higher. Casting sharp light across the valley, the mission stood on the edge between failure and survival. One path led to escalation and loss. The other depended on precision, patience, and someone willing to act without being seen. For now, the valley remained loud with gunfire and heavy with tension. The team stayed down. The enemy stayed confident, and she stayed still, waiting for the exact second when everything would change. The gunfire did not stop. It came in waves, sharp and steady, echoing across the valley like distant thunder that never moved away. Minutes felt like hours. The team stayed pressed into the ground, bodies tight against rock and dirt, waiting for even a small break that never seemed to come. Dust coated everything. It clung to skin, gear, and weapons. Every breath tasted dry. The heat began to rise as the sun climbed higher, turning the valley into a shallow bowl that trapped sound and pressure. The shadows they once relied on were shrinking fast. The team leader crawled a short distance to check on each position. He used hand signals, not words. Everyone understood. No injuries. Ammo holding, but not endless. Water already halfway gone. No clear way out. Another radio check came in. Support was still delayed. Conditions were not improving. They would have to manage on their own longer than expected. The enemy fire shifted slightly, adjusting angles, testing reactions. It was controlled, not reckless. Whoever was up there knew what they were doing. They were not rushing. They believed time was on their side. Every few seconds, a round struck close enough to make the ground jump. The sound alone kept nerves stretched tight. Still no one broke. Training kept them steady, even as muscles began to ache from staying low for so long. Behind the main group, she remained quiet and unseen. Her breathing was slow and even. She had already studied the terrain for longer than most people would notice. She saw how the enemy positions worked together. When one fired, another paused. When one went silent, another picked up. They were covering each other, creating the feeling of constant pressure. She also noticed the gaps. No defense was perfect. There were moments, small and brief, when a shooter exposed more than they meant to. A shoulder, a head, a shift in stance. These moments lasted less than a second, but to her, they were enough. She adjusted her position slightly, careful not to disturb the loose ground beneath her. Her movements were slow, almost invisible. The rest of the team was too focused on staying alive to notice what she was doing. And that was fine. Up front, the pressure continued to build. One of the team members whispered something sharp under his breath after a round struck too close for comfort. Another clenched his fists, then relaxed them, forcing himself to stay calm. The leader checked the time again. If this dragged on much longer, they would have to take a risk, a push, a break. Something. The enemy fire suddenly increased, as if sensing the team's growing tension. Shots came faster now, pinning them even harder. The message was clear. Stay down. Stay trapped. She watched this change carefully. More fire meant more movement. More movement meant more chances. She raised her optics again, blocking out everything else. The noise faded into the background. The world narrowed to angles and distance. She tracked one position in particular, higher than the rest, where shots seemed to guide the others. When that spot went quiet, the whole rhythm shifted. When it fired again, everything followed. She waited. Down below, the team felt the strain deepen. Shoulders burned. Knees ached. Focus took effort now. The sun beat down with no mercy. Sweat ran into eyes, stinging, distracting. A radio whisper cut through the noise. Still no support? Still waiting, she made a small adjustment to her rifle, then paused. Wind brushed across the valley, light but steady. She watched how it moved dust and dry grass. She counted again, matching breath 2 seconds. The enemy fired another long burst from the high position. She stayed still. The leader prepared to signal a shift, knowing it might draw fire. He hated the thought, but saw no other choice forming at the edge of the fight. Unseen and unannounced, she settled fully into position. Her body was relaxed, not tense. This was not the moment to rush. She was not trying to stop the entire fight at once. She was not trying to be noticed. She was focused on one thing only: removing pressure. One piece at a time. The team below had no idea that the shape of the battle was about to change. To them, it still felt like being trapped under an endless storm. The sound of gunfire filled every space. The enemy still believed they held complete control. She took one last look through her optics, confirming what she already knew. The distance. The angle. The timing. She did not think about what might happen next. She did not think about fear or outcome. She trusted the training that had shaped moments like this. As the enemy continued firing, confident and exposed for just a breath longer than before, she exhaled slowly. The valley remained loud. The team stayed pinned. No one noticed the shift that was coming. But it was closer now than anyone realized. The moment stretched longer than it should have. The valley was still loud, still tense, still full of sharp cracks and echoes that seemed to bounce forever. The team remained pressed down, each person focused on the small space directly in front of them. Survival had narrowed their world. She did not rush. Her breathing stayed slow, steady, almost calm, in a place that offered no comfort at all. She had already chosen her first target, not because it was the closest or the loudest, but because it mattered most. It was the position that guided the others, the one that set the rhythm of the fire. She waited for the right movement below her. The team leader gave a small hand signal, barely visible. Hold. Stay. Another burst of fire came from above. Stones cracked. Dirt sprayed. The pressure felt heavier now, like the valley itself was leaning in. She watched through her optics, tracking the familiar shape as it shifted again. A pause. A slight lean. A moment of confidence. She exhaled. The sound of her shot was sharp but brief, swallowed quickly by the larger noise of the firefight. It did not echo the way the others did. It did not announce itself. It simply happened. For a fraction of a second, nothing seemed different. Then the firing from that high position stopped. Down below, no one noticed right away. The team was still pinned. The sound of gunfire continued from other angles. But something subtle had changed. The rhythm felt off. She did not watch the result for long. She was already moving, slow and careful, shifting her position just enough to avoid drawing attention. Her focus moved to the next place she had marked in her mind. Up on the ridgeline, confusion rippled quietly. One position went silent. Another fired faster, trying to cover the gap. Shots came less evenly now, more rushed. She watched that rush. The team leader frowned slightly. The fire was still heavy, but it was no longer as controlled. He could feel it, even if he could not explain it yet. She lined up again, patient as before. She waited for the same thing she had waited for the first time. Exposure, confidence, a mistake. It came. Her second shot was just as calm as the first, just as deliberate. Again, the sound was small, almost lost in the chaos around it. Another enemy position fell silent. This time, the team noticed one of the operators lifted his head slightly, then ducked again, surprised by the brief lack of return fire from one direction. He glanced toward the leader, who was already scanning, trying to understand. The enemy reacted quickly, but not smoothly. Shots came harder now, less precise. They were firing more to intimidate than to control. She continued her quiet work. She was not firing fast. She was not trying to overwhelm. Each shot was its own decision, separated by movement and patience. Between shots, she stayed still, listening, watching, letting the field reset before she acted again. Down below, the team felt the pressure easing in small ways. They could lift their heads for half a second longer. They could shift positions without drawing instant fire. It was not freedom, but it was hope. The leader signaled again. Adjust. Prepare. The enemy tried to regroup, shifting positions, calling out to each other. Their voices carried briefly, sharp and urgent. Before being swallowed by distance, she noticed that too. She chose her next target carefully, not the one shouting, but the one moving with purpose, trying to organize the rest. Leadership was not always loud. She waited until the moment was right. The third shot came. This time. The silence that followed lasted longer. The valley did not go quiet, but it changed. The enemy fire became scattered. Gaps opened. Shots came from fewer directions. The team leader saw it clearly now. This was not luck. Something was working in their favor. He raised his head just enough to catch a glimpse of the ridgeline. He could not see her. No one could. But he understood what was happening. He signaled again. Move when ready. She shifted position once more, staying ahead of attention. Her muscles were steady, her focus unbroken. She did not think about how long she had been there, or how much pressure rested on her actions. She was simply doing her job. The enemy tried one last push, firing in a wide sweep meant to pin the team down again. It lacked coordination. It lacked direction. She watched it unfold. One more position exposed itself. Desperate to regain control, she did not hesitate. The fourth shot landed clean and final after that. The valley felt different. The team below moved. More freely now, shifting to stronger cover, preparing to change the situation entirely. They were no longer trapped, were no longer waiting to react. She stayed in overwatch, scanning for anything that might rise again. The enemy, once confident and steady, had lost something important. They no longer owned the high ground. They no longer controlled the fight. The balance had shifted. Quietly and without warning. And it all happened without a single word spoken. The change was not sudden, but it was clear. The valley no longer felt like a trap. The sound of enemy fire was thinner now, uneven, missing the tight rhythm that once pressed everyone into the dirt. The team felt it in their bodies before they fully understood it in their minds. The leader lifted his head a little longer this time. No shot came, shifted his shoulder, then his knee, testing the space around him. Still nothing close enough to force him back down. He gave a quiet signal, move. One by one, the team began to adjust their positions. It was slow and careful, nothing rushed. Each movement was small, planned, and covered by the others. They had been waiting for this moment, even if they did not know exactly what had created it. The enemy tried to respond. A few shots cracked from the ridgeline, but they lacked focus. They came from different angles, not working together, more reaction than control. Behind the team, she remained where she was, eyes steady, scanning every inch of the high ground. She was no longer choosing targets the same way. Now, she was watching for threats that could stop the team's movement. Anything that rose too confidently, anything that tried to reassert control. She caught one such movement near a broken rock face. Someone leaned out, trying to see what had changed below. She ended that attempt before it became a problem. The team felt the space open even more. They advanced another few meters, reaching stronger cover that had been impossible to reach earlier. Breathing became easier, shoulders lowered, focus sharpened. The leader checked each position again, this time with quick glances instead of rushed concern. Everyone was still in the fight. Everyone was moving. Radio traffic came in again. Support was closer now. Not immediate, but no longer a distant promise. They just needed to hold and continue pushing smartly. The enemy, sensing control slipping away, tried to regroup. Voices carried faintly across the rocks, tense and hurried. Shots fired without clear targets meant more to scare than to hit. She listened to those sounds, reading them like signals. Fear changed how people moved, made them careless. Another figure appeared briefly, running between cover on the ridge, exposed and desperate. She waited half a second longer than instinct suggested. Then she fired. The movement stopped, down below. The team leader nodded once, unseen by her, but deeply aware of what was happening. This was not luck. This was someone watching over them with precision and patience. The team spread out more confidently. Now, taking advantage of the broken enemy coordination, they returned controlled fire when needed. Pushing the remaining resistance farther back, the valley, once loud and suffocating, began to breathe. she stayed focused, never letting the quiet trick her into relaxing too soon. She scanned the edges, the shadows, the places where someone might try one last stand. The enemy made one final effort to slow the team's movement, firing from a lower angle that had gone unnoticed before. It was brief but dangerous. She caught it almost immediately. Another calm shot, another silence. The team used the opening to reach a position that gave them better sightlines and protection. From there, they could finally see the battlefield more clearly. The high ground no longer belonged entirely to the enemy. The leader signaled to hold and assess. Ammunition was checked, water shared. Small nods passed between team members. Relief was present but controlled. No one celebrated yet. She adjusted her position slightly, easing tension from muscles that had been locked for far too long. Still, she did not lower her guard. Her role was not finished until everyone was out. The enemy fire had nearly stopped now. Only a few distant shots echoed weakly, lacking direction or confidence. Support finally confirmed they were ready to assist if needed. Extraction plans were back on the table. The team prepared to move again, this time with purpose instead of desperation. She stayed in overwatch as they advanced, ensuring no last threat rose from the rocks above. The valley that had once felt impossible now felt manageable. Hard, dangerous, but no longer hopeless. What had changed everything was not noise or force. It was silence, patience, and careful choices made when no one else could afford to make them. As the team moved closer to safety, the weight of the moment settled in quietly. They knew how close they had come to being stuck there all day, exposed and running out of options. They also knew someone had kept them alive without ever stepping into view. The fight was not fully over yet. But the worst part had passed, and the valley at last was beginning to let them go. The valley was quieter now, but no one relaxed too quickly. Quiet could be dangerous. The team moved with care, stepping around rocks and debris, checking every angle as they made their way toward the extraction point. The tension had changed, not disappeared. It was lighter, but still present, like a weight that had not fully lifted. The leader paused and looked back along the path they had crossed. It was hard to believe how trapped they had been just hours earlier. From this angle, the ground looked almost harmless. That thought made him shake his head slightly. He knew better. Each member checked in with the others through short signals and brief looks. Everyone was tired. Faces were tight, eyes focused, but they were moving on their feet, not pressed into the dirt anymore. That alone felt like a victory. Behind them, she followed at a distance, still watching the high ground. Even now, she did not assume the danger was gone. She scanned the ridges one last time, making sure nothing stirred where silence now ruled. When the extraction signal finally came through, it felt unreal. The sound of aircraft in the distance grew slowly, cutting through the quiet like a reminder that they were not alone anymore. The team took positions to secure the area. It was routine, practiced, and steady. No one spoke more than necessary. Every movement was careful until the very end. As the aircraft settled in, dust rose into the air, blurring the ground and sky together. One by one, the team moved aboard. The leader counted them twice, then once more. Everyone was there. She boarded last, slipping into her seat without drawing attention. To anyone watching, she looked like just another member returning from a long mission. No one pointed. No one said anything. That was how it was meant to be. As the aircraft lifted off, the valley shrank below them. The ridges that once felt overwhelming now looked distant and still. The danger was behind them. Inside, the team sat in silence for a long moment. Exhaustion settled in now that adrenaline no longer held it back. Some leaned their heads against the walls. Others stared at nothing, replaying moments in their minds. The leader finally broke the silence. He did not speak loudly. He did not give a speech. He simply nodded in her direction. A few eyes followed. Understanding passed between them without words. Later, back at base, the mission was reviewed. Details were discussed. Decisions were examined. The close call was acknowledged. There were no dramatic retellings, no raised voices, just facts and quiet respect. What mattered most was simple. Everyone had come back. In the days that followed, the story of the valley did not spread far. It was not the kind of story that made headlines. There were no public medals, no interviews. That was never the point. Among the team, though, it stayed alive in small ways. In glances shared during training, in moments of silence when pressure built again, they remembered how close things had come. They remembered how control had slipped away from the enemy without warning, and they remembered that survival had come from patience, not noise. She returned to her routine like nothing had changed. Training, preparation, waiting for the next call. She did not talk about the valley. She did not need to. The work spoke for itself. For the team, the mission left a quiet mark. It reinforced something they already knew but rarely spoke about, that every role mattered. That sometimes the difference between loss and survival came from someone who never stepped into the spotlight. They also knew that trust was not built only through words or rank. It was built in moments when lives depended on unseen choices made under pressure. Time moved on. New missions came. New challenges replaced old ones. But the lesson stayed. When the team found themselves in tight spaces again, the pressure closed in and options felt limited, they remembered the valley. They remembered how calm could exist even in chaos. How patience could change everything, and somewhere in the background, always watching, was the quiet understanding that sometimes the most important actions were the ones no one noticed in the moment. The valley faded into memory, but its meaning did not. It became part of the fabric that held the team together. A reminder that survival was not always loud, and courage was not always seen. Sometimes it arrived quietly, one careful decision at a time.